I want to welcome everybody here tonight. If any one of you have something in Brodhead that, like I do, that has family memories or something, I did a lot of digging here. I did a lot of digging through my grandpa and grandma Brandenburg stuff, which came to my house after they passed. I also did a lot of digging in stuff that came from my parents' house when they passed. So this is a compilation of newspapers and family history. And if anybody disagrees with anything I say, just hold your comment, but check me on it afterwards, because we need to correct it, because it's going to be in black and white now. And I also recommended if anybody wanted to bring a memory with them or something from Bluff View that would jog everybody else's memory, to bring it along, and I hope you did, and we'll get to that when the program is done. The first thing I want to start with is the timeline of Bluff View Park. I'll give you a little more detail when I give you my talk, but I'm just going to read through the timeline. In 1921, Bill Munger built it on leased land from Mr. J.D. McNair. It opened on July 4th, 1921. Oscar Hyatt managed it for Mr. McNair from 1921 to 1924. Those were Pauline Stabler's parents, for you people that are familiar with Brodhead. John Doyle and Jim Hodges operated it for Munger. Mr. Moon operated it for Munger. He must have had a first name, but nowhere is he replying to anything but Mr. Moon. Fay and Jay Hooker operated it. In 1936, Nelson Nipple and Tom Smith purchased the land from Mr. McNair. In 1938, 2 years later, Tom Smith bought out Nipple and ran it until he passed away. 1948 to 1971, Louis Fund ran it. 1971 to 1977, Stan and Kate Whitehead ran it. Warren and Val Brandenburg, which are relations to my father, ran it from 1977 to 1980, and they had lived in Beloit all their life. Bill Milan ran it for 3 months, and then it went back to Stan Whitehead, which tells me that the Brandenburgs must have leased it and let it go back, and then so did it happen with Bill Milan. Gene Eldred and Kathy Scheidegger ran it for a while. In 1992, Lenny and Ann Pitkin ran it. In 1994, Mike Jones bought it and ran it. He still owns the property today, at least as current as I could read. Newts from Orfordville ran it for 2 years and closed it in 2003. On December 30th, 2015, the dance hall burned. So that's the timeline I had on it, and if you know of any other things I can add to it, I'm more than welcome. These are pictures and blow-ups that I had made of Bluff View from postcards. The Brodhead Print Center does a wonderful job. The bottom 3 are the interior pictures of the stage and each side of the dance hall, and they're from my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. On the other flyer, I copied out of the archives we have here and what I had at home, newspaper articles on some of the things that were being held down there. And I had stuff in my archives that we didn't have over here, and now we all have. The Brodhead Print Center, actually, I paid for these, and then they gave another set for me to put in the museums. So that was very nice. If you're going in there, thank them. Bill Munger owned Waverly Beach in Beloit, and he worked out a 5-year lease agreement for 10 acres on the east side of the Sugar River by the Clarence Covered Bridge with J.D. McNair in 1921. Work then started on an amusement park that was going to be open in 6 weeks. There was to be a dance pavilion, 60 by 70 feet, outdoor bowling, and a concession stand. There will be no dancing held on Sundays. The big feature was a bathing beach. Several Monroe residents owned cottages near Clarence Bridge and would welcome the opportunity to spend the hot summer days and evenings at the river. In May of 1921, John Moore and his crew began construction. The building itself was built on pylons because of the often flooding, and because it flooded, they placed wooden flaps on the north and south ends, and when the floodwater came up, they opened up those flaps so the floodwater would go under the floor instead of pushing the building off the pylons. On July 4th, 1921, it was opened. It had bowling lanes, a rifle range, a merry-go-round, a Ferris wheel, bathing, fishing, dancing, and plenty of room for picnics. It was open 7 nights a week and in the summer only. At one end of the dance hall, there was a refreshment stand, and dances had 5 cents each admission. In those days, there was a cave on the west side of the river large enough for 12 horses. At one time, Paul Tonight operated a store on the west side of the bridge. And that picture is right here. It was on the west side of the bridge, built into the bluff, and the last time the road was made wider, it was torn down. And this was taken by my godmother in the fall before they tore it down in the spring. It was also an ice business there for a time. The Bridge Inn restaurant was operated by Oscar Hyatt in 1925 for a couple years, and it was heavily patronized by the crowds at the park because there was no alcohol at the park then. So as soon as there was a break at the dance, they'd all go down the lane and across the bridge and go over to the restaurant, and then they'd come back for the next dance. It was also a private home. Any of you that know Mary Tim, she lived there as a child with her family for a short time when they came back from, I think, Minnesota. In 1934, the park received a beer license, and they had a bar built on the west side of the dance pavilion. In 1935, a liquor license was issued. My grandfather, George Brandenburg, was a constable at the park when it opened, and when the liquor license was granted, he turned in his badge and said, "I have enough trouble with these young bucks without liquor. Here's my badge." I'm lucky enough to have inherited his billy club that he carried when he was a constable. And it was one of the things that I got from Grandma and Grandpa's house. In the mid-30s, a lot of kitten balls were played at the park. Kitten ball games were played at the park. My mom and dad met there during a kitten ball tournament in May of 1939 and were married 6 weeks later. What I have here is a 14-inch kitten ball, and they come between 11, didn't mean to drop it, but my hand doesn't guide it. They come between 11 and 16 inches. And the reason they're made that big is the guys could come down and they didn't have to own a glove. They could catch the ball without a glove. It's not real soft, so I'm not so sure I'd want to, and obviously I couldn't because my hand wouldn't hold it. And this was a kitten ball that I got from my dad's. Pauline Stabler stated in an article, there was, on July 4th, a Brodhead Albany tug-of-war across the river. The loser ended up getting pretty wet. Truman Olin recalls, power was supplied by a 110-volt battery system driven by a temperamental one-cylinder engine. A man named Herb Bliss was always welcome at Bluff View. You see, he had a way with that engine. He could fix it each time it failed. Tom Smith replaced the one-cylinder engine with a 4-cylinder engine from a Dodge automobile. Tom Smith's ashes were spread on the park when he died. He was still in Owner when he passed. Like any river, the sugar runs over its banks and the water coursed through under the floor. There would be a sign put at the road that said, "No dancing tonight." There was no reason to give a reason, everybody knew. In 1937, a mammoth celebration was held. Festivities started at noon, continued into the wee hours of the morning. In the afternoon, they held races, games, and contests for the young folk. A kitten ball game between Bluff View Park boys and the Farm Bureau team from Monroe was held. This was a very great rivalry between those teams. There was fireworks and music in the evening. In 1939, Owen Williams ran the roller rink skating at the park, and it was very popular in the summertime. An ad from 1940 states, skate in pleasant surroundings on a perfect floor, the best skates, well-ventilated rink to Hammond organ music recorded in perfect skate time, Monday through Thursday nights. And that leads me to the skates I have here, which were my dad's. The research that my son has done on it is these skates were made in 1916 or 17, and my dad was born in 1916. And they're unique in that the wheels are mahogany, solid mahogany wood. And if you take this nut, I'll call it, if I'm wrong, correct me. If you take that off, you can see, if you look real closely, there's little ball bearings in there, and the wheels are going around on little ball bearings. And when my father passed away in 2001, Grandma, of course, was asking everybody what they wanted, and Mike says, I want Grandpa's skates. He always said he had a pair of skates that he skated. And my son and his second wife worked at the roller den for probably 15, 17 years. My grandkids learned to skate there and everything, so the skates were really important to me. And then he said there was one wheel that wasn't real good on these skates. So once when he was traveling in Minnesota, he found another pair and he bought it just for the wheel, but he's never touched and tried to make it perfect so he could skate with them. And maybe someday he will. A New Year's Eve party was held on December 31st, 1940, with music by Freddie Schultz Band. Freddie Schultz was my great uncle, and my father played occasionally with him. There were hats and horns and noisemakers. Dance tickets for Bill Carlson and his band of A Million Thrills cost 50 cents at the door in May of 1941. In the 50s, there were movies at the park shown on a large white sheet, weather permitting, which was connected to 2 trees. My father, Carl Brandenburg, called square dances some Sunday afternoons for 4-H clubs of Greene County in the 50s and 60s. I have this square dancing outfit. I don't think I would have worn it as a teenager. I wouldn't have wanted to have been embarrassed. But I'm sure somebody did, and it ended up in Grandma's. But this is a square dancing outfit. I also have a black and silver one as well. And this is the one of the things that I'd like you to come look at to see if you want for the museum. For many, many years, dances were held on Saturday nights. How many people in this room went and danced at Bluff View Park? It was the place to go. There were benefits to aid somebody that needed help. There were free dances because the bar had already paid the band. There were wedding dances and anniversary dances to local bands like the State Lane Playboys that we heard in the parade on Saturday. Polkas were huge and the dance floor was packed. The parking lot was usually full, as was the driveway up and down, and the highway often had cars back to McNair's Corner. One thing was very different from today at dances. There were no drinks allowed on the dance floor. We would dance 4 to 6 dances and head for the bathrooms and a drink, which we enjoyed outside or in the bar, and then we'd head back to dance again. My husband and I were married in 1961, and about at least once a month, sometimes twice, we would go to Bluff View because we knew somebody that was getting married or having a dance or a benefit or whatever. We would take a $20 bill, and he'd put $3 aside for the babysitter in one pocket, and we'd go down and we'd dance 4, 5, 6 dances. We'd go out and have a drink, use the bathroom, go back in, and we were big dancers. We'd dance again. We'd do that maybe 2, 3 times, and when the bar closed at 1 o'clock, if we had enough money left out of our $20 bill, we went to Judah for breakfast. But we always got up and took the kids to Sunday school the next morning. All amusements were gone. The park playground was behind the parking lot, and in 1971, Stan and Kate Whitehead purchased the park and completely remodeled the bar room. New bathrooms were installed. Does anyone remember the rush to the outdoor toilets that were on the right-hand side when the band took a break? Do you remember the board windows on the right side of the dance floor that folded up when it got dark so the cool air from the low ground could come into the dance hall? A kitchen was installed to serve banquets. The hall could serve 330 persons at a time. The business was open 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. daily. In the 90s, Bluff View hosted bingo every Thursday night. Tuesday was euchre tournament night. On Sunday afternoons, there was country line dancing. Mud volleyball tournaments were held down by the river. Auctions, teen dances on Wednesday night, sumo wrestling, and American Lovers Boys during the hunting season. That was the first place I ever got to see a stripper, with American Lover Boys. My father hosted bluegrass open mic bands one Sunday a month for 25 years. And what most people here might not know, being as though they were elderly when they passed, he passed the hat, and the bar never paid him. He would pass the hat, and that pass the hat, whatever he got in that hat was their groceries for the month. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been, it'd been pretty scant. And then Mike told me that when my son, when Stan and Kate Whitehead opened it, Stan would slip a $100 bill in his pocket and say, "Don't tell Kate." And then a little while later, Kate would slip a $100 bill in his pocket and say, "Don't tell Stan." So they ate a little better. An article for Bluff View states their 75th year had 2 or 3 generations of family that have had wedding and anniversary dances there. The floor was the original hardwood maple, as was the dome of the building. Air conditioning was added in July of 1996. A pig roast, a DJ, bonfire, fireworks was all planned to celebrate the 75 years. A dance contest was also planned. Mike Jones bought the park in 1994. After running it for a few years, he leased it to Newts from Orfordville. They ran it for 2 years, and it closed for the final time, we believe, in 2003. We have found ads for November and December of 2003, but I just got that at the end of last week that year. So we're going to look in 2004 and see if we can find an article, and I haven't had it yet. On Tuesday, December 30th, 2014, the Brodhead Fire Department was dispatched to Bluff View. When they arrived, the dance hall was totally engulfed. 12 departments responded. The Greene County Highway Department assisted with salting the roads due to the low temperatures and the freezing water on the road. The building had been used to store hay for years, which made fighting the fire very difficult. When Mike brought me the roller skates the other night, he was talking to one of the firemen, and he said they just couldn't get it out. They wished they could have got under the floor. And Mike said, "Why didn't they lift the flaps?" But none of the firemen at the time knew that. They could have gotten under the floor. The building was gone, but so many, many, many memories remain. If any one of you has $799,900 laying around that you'd like to invest, the property at Bluff View is for sale right now. I had my picture taken by a photographer, and she told me that they'd seen it on there, and one of their friends was really excited until they told them it was in a floodplain. And this is how they describe it. Gorgeous 9.21 acre. I don't know what happened to the other 75% of an acre, because it was 10 acres when it was bought, is located on the banks of the Sugar River. This is your chance to own your own personal campground, complete with plenty of room for your horses or other livestock. Electrical hookups for 15 campers and plenty of room for more campsites. Includes a beautifully remodeled 1-bedroom cabin with heated floors. Plan on entertaining all your favorite people with your XL projection screen setup. The cabin includes a bar, full kitchen with plenty of cabinet space, a loft, and a bedroom includes 2 TVs and a bathroom with an amazing shower you have to see. Great fishing off the shores that run the length of your land. Grab your tubes, kayak and drop in, or kayak and drop in at County F and enjoy a 4-hour float back to your property. The possibilities are endless with this dream getaway. Now, if you're familiar with Bluff View, there was a Pebble Dash house. Just down when you drove in, there was always a house off to the left. that is what has been remodeled into this. I'm guessing they didn't build this new because in a floodplain, they probably would have never got permits. So there's at least one wall in this but it is available. You can't find it under homes. You have to search land at the Sugar River or Highway 11 to get it. Did anybody want to come up and speak into the mic about a memory, or did anybody bring anything that they have? Every family must have garbage laying around like mine does. Anybody want to come up and speak? Oh, come on. It was the place to go. And in those days, there was Waverly Beach and Beloit, which is now where a restaurant is, and there was also the Wigwam between here and Beloit. And if you didn't go to one of them, you went to another one. They were really hopping places.
I remember going to the movies out there before we moved to Southside Park.
Anything else that you can remember they might have done down there that I didn't have in my story? Jay? Yeah.
The JC's and JSETs, I think it was JSETs, had a style show, and everybody was looking into it. Had a style show, and it was a fundraiser, and it was at Bluff View, and so people that had maybe, I don't know, that was back when we had like clothing stores in town. So they all brought those kinds of things, and then they had us model them. And I remember walking down the aisle, and I'd never realized how long Bluff View really was until you see everybody staring at you and you're in some sort of clothes that you don't ever think you're going to wear again. But and Mary Milks was at the piano and looking back at you and just playing it along like it was the music that was accompanying your style. And then there were maybe Beth Carson and Kathy Landerholm and all of these people, and it was just so much fun. So fast forward, and then my class reunion, my second class reunion, I think, was there at the so a lot of class reunions there.
How did they light that place when it was dark back in the early days?
Well, I would imagine with this battery is what ran lights. I mean, they had a Ferris wheel. There had to be a motor on the Ferris wheel, I would think. There wasn't a lot of detail about it, but that one engine battery or whatever, I have no idea. I mean, it's a lost in history.
When did electricity first get out there, since Brodhead was so early with electricity?
You know, somebody came up to me and said that one day, and I didn't write it down, and I don't remember.
Well, I know where it came up where Betty Earlywine lives. The electricity never made it to like where Betty Earlywine lived, that County B that goes towards Footville. That we got power there in 1944.
So I don't know how long it ran on just small engines and stuff like that. I just happened to think of one thing I didn't put in the story. How many of you danced at Bluff View? Anybody remember anything strange about the floor? When you come across in front of the stage from right to left, there was a bump. And most people knew it was there, except the drunks who couldn't remember. And I don't know if I ever saw anybody fall, but it was always, you'd see somebody next to you go like this, and you knew they were dancing up over that hump in the floor. Now, the stories all say it was built on pylons. I thought my dad always said it was built on tree trunks, which could have been the pylons. They could have used tree trunks. But I didn't know the story about the flaps until Mike told me.
So was that also the skating floor then, the outdoor skating floor, or was that something different than that?
Well, I think all the skating and everything else went on inside the, because if you notice when I read it was Monday night skating was 4 nights a week, but then in the 70s it was Tuesday night euchre, Wednesday night bingo, something was every night of the week just about in the 70s. Anybody else?
I have, I guess romance bloomed in the family, in our family. My dad always said that he and my mom first became acquainted or well acquainted roller skating there. And then in the 70s, they had dance lessons one weeknight during the summer. And Doug's sister and I took dance lessons together, and romance bloomed between Doug's sister and her husband of almost 50 years, thanks to the dance lessons at Bluff View.
Well, I did tell you the story of my mom and dad meeting there. My dad was engaged to someone else when they met. They were married 6 weeks later, and my mom always said if I'd have known him better, I'd have never married him. Anybody else have a personal story that they'd like to share?
We had our wedding dance there in
1962. Anybody else got a better idea when it might have closed?
The second to last wedding,
And what year was that?
2003,
2003. And what month were you married?
September.
Okay, so maybe.
We'll spot of the date.
No, I mean, Mike Jones was the only one, and I finally got a hold of him through relatives, and he called, I got a hold of him, and I sent an email, and he finally got back to me last week, and so we went through the 2003 papers, but they were advertising something on a Saturday night in November and December, but then we didn't find any more, so.
Barb Clark's daughter was the last wedding.
Yeah. Lots of good memories down there. Anybody else?
Green County pork producers used to have their annual pork dinner there for several years, and the highlight was the State Line Playboy songs.
Yep. And when you see them in the parade, you think, gee, they haven't aged too much, and yet they were playing many years ago down there. Anybody else?
I have to talk about the guy in the white pants and the white shoes. So in the 70s also, they had wedding dances there every weekend, and you presumably didn't have to know the people that were getting married. You could just go to their wedding dance. And that was how we stayed out of trouble in the 70s. And so we went there quite a bit, and there was always a short man. Do you remember him? Short man that always wore white shoes. He was maybe, when you're in your teens, everybody seems like they're elderly, but he was short and had white hair. He always he was from Durand and always wore his white shoes, and he would always ask all the teenage girls to dance. And it was just part of the mystique of Bluff View to go dance with the man with the white shoes. Do you know did you ever?
His last name was Cleaver.
Cleaver? Okay. So, he spent the night dancing with the teenage girls, and evidently, people were quite willing to dance or maybe shuffle around the floor with him, but that was the Bluff View mystique.
A lot of the dances, they didn't call them, but you switch partners, or there were things that you'd like, especially a polka or something. You'd start with one and you'd dance with 5-6 people before the dance was over, because they keep playing them over and over and over again. Different songs. When I was going out there in the 70s, I used to love to dance with Charlie Olson, Bob Olson's dad. He smelled so good. And he was soaked when you danced with him. And then when I sold Avon, I found out he wore a woman's perfume. Anybody else? Yeah.
Harry Peterson, everyone knows who Harry Peterson is, right? Anyway, they always went there, and he always took 2 shirts. He wore one shirt and got it soaking wet, and then put another one on. And then go home after the dance and milk, right? He always milked after the dance.
Well, I know we had card club. That was a cheap entertainment when we were first married. And we'd play cards usually till 11 or midnight, and about 10 or 10:30 somebody'd say, well, isn't that so-and-so's mom and dad or aunt and uncle that are at Bluff View tonight? And all of a sudden card club was over and we all went to Bluff View. Because you didn't have to know. And if you were coming home from Monroe, or as we would come home from like Lena or something, and there was cars parked out in the road, well, we might as well go. They won't know any strangers if there's this many people there. It was a good place to be. Lots of wonderful memories. I'm sure there's not so many wonderful, but it's fun. It was very interesting for me to do the research on it. And of course, because I was a Spring Grove kid, I had some stuff in my family stuff, but I enjoyed doing it. Thank you very much.